Welcome back to the pragmatismusa.com video and audio feed. Today's episode is titled Coronavirus Conspiracy Theories. Today, as I'm sitting in my home and socially distancing in May of 2020, I want to discuss some of the insane conspiracy theories that have been out there, which are really dangerous, sickening, and just moronic. Follow me at pragmatismusa.com. You can email me at Igor, I-G-O-R, at pragmatismusa.com. Follow me on Facebook at pragmatismusa.com, on YouTube at pragmatismusa, and on Twitter and Instagram at pragmatismusa76. That is the digits 76, and we are also working on a podcast. Now, I will tell you that conspiracy theories right now for coronavirus are especially dangerous. I think conspiracy theories are always idiotic and sometimes dangerous, but now you've got a combination of being uniquely stupid, uniquely grandiose, even more so than normal, but really, really dangerous because now they're affecting people's lives. And I've heard ridiculous explanations from the right and the left. I would say that the right is in the lead on its insane conspiracy theories. They're probably responsible, I don't know, my gut instinct tells me maybe 70%, but the left isn't that far behind, okay? I think that there's a lot of crazy stuff on the left right now in terms of conspiracy theories as well regarding coronavirus. Now, I will tell you right now, I am not a conspiracy theorist. In fact, I despise conspiracy theories. I've never been a conspiracy theorist, and I think really that it's just a form of intellectual laziness that is particularly sickening. And now it's dangerous. Now, why am I not a conspiracy theorist? First of all, I think that most conspiracies are essentially impossible. Okay, now I understand there were, the conspiracy to kill Abraham Lincoln, for example, it was followed through. But now, okay, we're talking about conspiracies on a scale that are just ridiculous to carry out, like the 9/11 conspiracies that the government was responsible for knocking down these buildings. I mean, think about the amount of people that would have to be involved in a secret like this. People are not very good at keeping secrets. They're not very good at staying organized. And we're talking about all kinds of people, okay, from the upper echelons of government all the way down, okay, that must have been responsible for destroying the towers during 9/11. I mean, this is insanity to believe stuff like this. It's the same thing with coronavirus, okay? How many people would have to be involved and in on the secret, and why? What the hell is the point? And every explanation I've heard is just insane. From China wants to destroy the world economy, which makes no sense because it's hurting its own economy, okay, to Bill Gates, who has fought pandemics, okay, for much of the past several years of his life, is doing it to make himself even wealthier, to population control. I mean, all of them are, it's just one of them being dumber than the next and dumber than the next. A lot of this coming from the Trump administration as well. Today, okay, being May 17th, what I heard from Eric Trump is that the coronavirus is going to magically disappear on November 3rd after the election. I mean, you've got to be a truly sick mind to believe something like this, okay? But this is the kind of stupidity that is being spread right now, okay? Now, the second reason I can't stand conspiracy theories is because they're lazy, okay? Most people who are conspiracy theorists don't really take the time to understand the way that things work. Instead, they concoct these elaborate explanations for how things are working and say, well, there's something wrong with you if you don't believe them, right? Like, how could you not believe that the government is in on coronavirus? Man, there's something wrong with you. No, if you actually read up about this stuff, it makes perfect sense. Okay, and really, in most cases, Occam's razor, which is that the simplest explanation oftentimes is the most sensible one, continues to hold true. Okay, we've actually had a lot of these kinds of outbreaks in the past several years. We had H1N1, we had SARS, we had Ebola, we had MERS, now we have coronavirus, and what I've read from scientists is that they're saying, it's because we're intruding on a lot of areas right now where we previously have not, in terms of where animals have been before. And we are unleashing a lot of parasites and bacteria through our environmental actions that may be leading to this. That makes a hell of a lot more sense than somebody in a scientist sitting there creating some kind of a pathogen that's killing a bunch of people, okay? Third, they're never based on facts, okay? You can hit a conspiracy theorist with a truckload of facts. It's not going to make a difference. They create their own facts and their own reality, okay? And me, I am big on facts, okay? I will take information from people who actually study this sort of stuff, synthesize that information, and come to my own opinions, okay? But first, I have to start with the facts. I can't just create a bunch of crap out of my mind, okay? Worst of all, they distract you from real problems, okay? And when people come up with these crazy, elaborate explanations for coronavirus, they're ignoring what our real problems are. Our real problems are the gaps between rich and poor. Our real problems are our inadequate healthcare systems. Our real problems are corruption. Our real problems are the way that we have failed, actually, in sharing information among various healthcare systems. These are real issues, and they are serious issues, and you don't need conspiracy theorists, okay, or conspiracy theories to explain a lot of this stuff. Because really, when you think about it, a lot of it makes sense, okay? Right now, we are struggling not just with coronavirus, but economically we are struggling. That is not a function of a conspiracy theory. It is a function of the reality that the rich are controlling a hell of a lot more of the world's wealth than they have before. And that leads a lot of other people to suffer, especially in the United States, when they start missing paychecks. There are basic explanations for this that don't require these idiotic, elaborate conspiracy theories. Pay attention to actually what's going on out there, and you're not going to need conspiracy theories. Now, when I talk about the real problems, I'm not just talking about Trump's ineptitude, okay? Because there is no question that Trump has completely failed in managing this outbreak. No question at all. But it doesn't stop there, okay? And it also goes to our healthcare system at all, as well, okay? Our healthcare system has failed, okay, in dealing with coronavirus because we simply don't have enough resources. Where are the PPE out there, for example, to protect our healthcare workers? That is a failure that we need to be talking about instead of coming up with these elaborate conspiracy theories, okay? We're not talking about how both parties have failed in pandemic awareness. I keep hearing about how well Obama, he left a 69-page playbook on pandemic preparedness. Give me a break, that wasn't enough. Okay, Bill Gates has been talking about pandemic preparedness for years right now and said, look, the next pandemic, it's going to happen at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Okay, writing a 69-page pamphlet is not enough. You need resources. We could have committed resources during the Bush administration, the Obama administration, certainly during the Trump administration. Everyone is responsible for this. Yes, Trump may be the worst, and what the hell has he been doing for the past 3.5 years? Okay, but at the same time, let's not let others off the hook as well, because I don't remember a lot of conversation about pandemic preparedness under Obama either. Okay, let's not let the parties off the hook over here for what we should have seen as a problem that we knew was coming. Okay. And another thing, we're not talking about economic equality right now, and both parties are responsible for that. Both parties have allowed the system to get to the point where missing one paycheck in America presents a catastrophic problem for a great deal of Americans. What is it? Something like 60 to 70% of Americans cannot come up with $400 worth of cash in an emergency situation? How do we get to that point? Okay, these aren't conspiracies. These are real problems. Okay? So instead of looking for boogeymen elsewhere, why don't we actually focus on reality right now? Okay. So this is really an issue in our country because we need certain things in order to deal with coronavirus. And one of the things that I've been reading about a lot lately, and probably that you've heard about a lot lately, is contact tracing. And what is it? Okay, first of all, we have used contact tracing before in the past. When the AIDS epidemic broke out in the mid-'80s, what we did is we went to people who already had AIDS and asked them, okay, who have you been in contact with, and especially who have you had sexual contact with? And no one was obligated to actually disclose this, but this was optional, but many people cared and they were forthcoming with information. And although the AIDS response had plenty of problems. It could have been worse had we not done contact tracing. So what is contact tracing? Well, contact tracing means in the coronavirus, in our coronavirus event, it basically means that someone who has coronavirus and tests positive, you go to that person, you ask them, okay, where have you been? Who have you spent a lot of time with? Who have you been in contact with? And you go and actually then go and track down those people and ask them the same questions and start testing them as well. So you start small and you expand and you expand and you expand and you actually identify the people who potentially are carriers of coronavirus. Now, in order to do this, you need various instruments, okay? And those instruments right now are primarily technological in nature, okay? And the problem that we are having right now, okay, is that we don't trust our technology and we don't trust our information delivery systems and we don't trust our government, okay? And in the United States, we're really going to have a problem with coronavirus contact tracing, and we're going to get hit, I think, much worse in the future than other countries with coronavirus and have to open up much more slowly than other countries as a result of coronavirus because we don't trust our institutions, okay? And this is when we are talking about three major institutions. The general media, our social media institutions, okay, and that's Google and Facebook, and I'll throw Google into it, and government, okay? And here I want to start with the media, okay, which people already are saying, especially on the right, well, I don't trust the media, fake news, blah, blah, blah. But you got to start somewhere. First of all, I think many of those claims are nonsense anyway. The notion that some of these very reputable magazines and newspapers and TV stations and radio stations are deliberately misleading you, I think is nonsense, particularly when you think, well, they're lying to me, but Trump is telling me the truth. That I really don't understand, okay? So we got to start somewhere, and let me start with what I think is a reputable news source. Now, most of the time I don't read them, but most of the time I don't read Newsweek, but I'm going to start with Newsweek because I think they had a pretty interesting article about some of the challenges that we're going to be facing with respect to coronavirus contact tracing. And here I'm reading from an article in the May 22nd, 2020 edition called Privacy versus Public Health. And I think this article really gets to the core of many of the problems that we are going to be facing with coronavirus that are really the result of lack of trust. And that leads to these crazy conspiracy theories, and it also leads to people not actually taking the steps that they need to in order to deal with this virus more quickly. Let me read from the article. Quote, with the coronavirus infecting tens of thousands of people each day, tracking down all those contacts would take an army of healthcare workers, about 100,000, says the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Well, first of all, where are we going to get all these healthcare workers? Okay, the government hasn't actually allocated all of this money for healthcare workers. I mean, we're much more interested in giving money to big corporations and tax breaks, which is what most of the coronavirus stimulus has been, by the way. The poor and the middle class get $1,200, and everyone else gets a huge tax break. But where's the money going to come from to pay for these 100,000 workers? And where is the manpower going to come from as well? Okay. Well, if you pay people enough, I suppose that you can actually do this. Okay. But that's just the beginning of our problems. Okay. Because really we have a trust issue. And if you really want to understand how lacking our trust of government is, you have to look at it in relation to other governments. And here I'm talking about a place like South Korea. Now, South Korea has a population of 52 million people, okay? But they have a population density of 13 times that of the United States, okay? So even though they are roughly only 1/6 of the United States, they're packed in much more tightly, okay? And usually that actually means that these diseases would spread much more quickly in a place like South Korea, but that hasn't happened. And that's because the government has managed the coronavirus outbreak there exceptionally well, But one of the reasons that it's managed it exceptionally well is because the people actually trust their government over there. Because, see, in South Korea, they don't say government is the problem, because in South Korea, they actually have a competent government that the people have held to account, and as a result, okay, they've gotten a government that actually does things for them, which is a really novel concept in the United States, where our government basically is so corrupt that it screws a lot more things up than actually gets them right, okay? So let's look at some of the numbers in South Korea. And I'm reading again from this Newsweek article. Quote, it's worked in South Korea, which achieved COVID-19 numbers that are the envy of much of the world. As of early May, it logged fewer than 11,000 cases in a population of 50 million and just over 250 deaths. That's it. Okay, it's a lot of deaths. Well, I don't want to minimize anyone's death, but it's still 250. Okay, now that is 1/16 the U.S. per capita case rate and 1/300th the death rate. More than 20 countries, including most of Asia, have already been enlisting cell phones to help identify those who might have been exposed to the infection, so those people can self-isolate or get cleared by a test. America, with its vaunted technology industry, is a laggard. Think about what South Korea has done. 250 deaths. Now, right now, as of May 17th that I'm sitting here, the United States has about 90,000. South Korea, which identified its first coronavirus case on the same day that we identified ours, has 11,000 cases. We have what, 1.5 million? Now, they've been able to actually utilize technology. Okay? But the people in South Korea actually trust their government enough to allow them to actually use that technology, to participate in that technology for their own public safety. Okay? Let me read from the article again. Quote, Americans are not quite like the rest of the world. Perhaps more than the population of any other country in the world, Americans tend to resist letting the government keep a close eye on them, even under life and death circumstances. In the case of contact tracing, that reluctance looks like an immovable obstacle. You know what? In many respects, I don't blame Americans. We don't trust our government, and why the hell should we? They lie to us all the time. Why do they lie to us? Because you allow them to lie. Okay? Don't blame them, blame yourself. We put these people into power. Okay? You like slick politicians who are going to get on there, okay, and lie to you and then put a knife right in your back. Okay? Don't blame them. You want to blame Trump, you want to blame Mike Pence, you want to blame Hillary Clinton, blame Barack Obama, blame Joseph Biden, you put them into power. Okay? You knew they were lying to you and you tolerated it anyway. Okay? And now you say, I don't trust my government. Well, then elect the government that you actually do trust, because now your lack of trust in government is actually costing people their lives. If we had a government that we could trust and that was competent, we could manage this crisis like the South Koreans have, or like they have in New Zealand, or like they have in Germany, where they've done a much better job than we have in the United States. Okay? But here in the United States, because we don't trust our government, because we have an incompetent government, we're not giving them the tools necessary to actually track us, because we don't trust them, and I don't think that they could create the tools properly anyway, because they're incompetent. Okay, so we don't trust our media, we don't trust our government, and we're not going to trust our social media either. Okay? Well, let's take a look at Google and Facebook, because here's the thing. Okay, right now there's so much information out there that is being spread through Google and Facebook that we have to rely on these entities to keep us apprised of what's going on with coronavirus. But we don't trust them because there's so much data tracking. Okay? Quote, it's no wonder there's little appetite for requiring people to submit to electronic tracking. Any smartphone-based contact tracing apps would have to be optional. Optional to download, optional to activate, optional to self-isolate or get tested if notified of exposure, optional to report being infected, and optional to share related data with public health officials or anyone else. I don't have a problem with optional. The last thing I want is the government to say, you have to install this app on your phone. I don't want that. I don't want our government doing that. I don't want any government doing it. Okay? But if it's optional, it's only going to work if you have enough people who are using it. And people are only going to use it if they actually trust Google and Facebook and the government. And the United States, we don't trust any of them. Quote, in Europe, optional participation is not expected to be a big impediment. An Oxford University survey found acceptance of contact tracing apps in Germany, Italy, and France would run between 68 and 86%. In the US, by contrast, only 45% of people find contact tracing with smartphones acceptable, according to a university by the Pew Research Center in April. To prove really useful, at least 60% of the population would have to participate, says Jennifer Dastel, director of Tech Law, of the Tech Law Security Program at American University Washington College of Law. With all the skepticism here, it's not clear how we'd get to that level of compliance. Well, you're not. Okay? The Europeans, obviously, they trust their governments because they have governments that don't lie to them as much in Western Europe and are more competent than ours. Yeah, you can expect compliance over there of 68 and 86, between 68 to 86%. Here we're getting 45%. It's not enough because we don't trust our institutions. And we don't trust our institutions because they're not working for us. And they're not working for us because we allowed them to not work for us. Quote, a study by the Kaiser Family Foundation found that half as many people would download a contact tracing app from a tech company as from a public health agency. Okay, so that means we trust the Googles and Facebooks of this world even less our own public health agencies. But what happens when you can't trust the CDC or the FDA, which we have a problem with as well? How are you going to do contact tracing when people do not actually participate? And how are you going to get coronavirus under control without the contact tracing? How long are we going to be in this situation right now of being socially distanced, of having our economy wrecked, of having people dying out there, of having people getting sick? Okay, my wife has had coronavirus. She's still struggling with it. 7 weeks now. It's miserable. How long is the situation going to go on? How many more people are going to suffer? Okay, because of what we've done to our government and our institutions. If we cannot trust this government and these institutions, and they haven't earned our trust, they don't deserve it, that means we cannot even be responsible for our public health. The most basic need that we have is health. And we can't actually trust the institutions that are responsible for protecting it. And this is where our government has failed. Because if you think that Google and Facebook have failed in protecting your privacy, you're right. But you have to ask yourself another question. Why has the government allowed them to fail? We talk all the time about, well, I want to get rid of regulations. Really? Do you want to regulate Google and Facebook less? If you don't trust them already, why would you want actually to give them more power? You look at whether we should actually be regulating some of them. Well, take a look at this, okay? Or ask yourself this. Why are these Silicon Valley companies, and why are corporations in general, so careless with our private information? And this is where I look at something like Equifax. Equifax released millions, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of pieces or of individuals' information. They allowed it to actually get out to criminal elements in the world. These are people's social security numbers, their birth dates, their credit information. It just happened under Equifax, which was hacked in because they didn't actually want to spend the money to properly maintain their information technology systems. And what happens to Equifax? It pays a fine. Folks, the people who are running Equifax, or we're running Equifax, they belong in jail. What is a fine going to do? You notice that Equifax is still around as a company? It's one of the 3 major credit reporting agencies still. Why? They allowed millions of bits of information to get out there. They have subjected people to all kinds of harm out there and potential danger, not only for the next few years, but decades, because their private information is out there. And nobody over there is actually going to jail for something like this? How does the government tolerate something like this? And now you want us to trust Google and Facebook to actually keep our medical data private. Because at this point, okay, unlike Equifax, which just gets critical data, okay, but Google and Facebook are going to have critical data in addition to imperative medical data as well. And we actually trust them with this? Why aren't we hammering Equifax? Why isn't the government hammering Google, Facebook, after allowing our information to get hacked? after disclosing our information, after invading our privacy. Now, I understand some of it, a lot of it, we're doing ourselves. We're turning over a hell of a lot of information to Facebook, okay, to YouTube, okay, to all of these platforms. But at the same time, if they actually let it get out and be shared among people who have no business actually having this information, folks, somebody needs to go to jail. A fine is not enough. We tolerate so much from these corporations. Dieselgate, who's gone to jail? Volkswagen was involved in a process by which they were skirting environmental protection laws. And that process actually could have led to the deaths of thousands of people from asthma and other issues. Who's going to jail? A fine? Fine, you give them a $4 billion fine. What does that mean to them? They're one of the biggest automakers in the world. These are some of the biggest companies in the world, and they are responsible for very damaging effects upon the world, and all we're doing is fining them. I don't blame people for not trusting Google, Facebook. I don't blame them. And I don't blame people for not trusting the government either. Because Google and Facebook actually are going to be reckless with your data, and the American government is going to allow them to be reckless with your data. This isn't a conspiracy. This is just basic incompetence, and it's basic corruption. The reason that Google and Facebook haven't been properly regulated by the United States government is because they've contributed so much money to politicians on both sides. You think the Democrats are going to protect you? You think they're the good guys here? They're not. You think the Republicans are going to protect you? They're the good guys? Oh, we want to get rid of regulations? Really? You want to get rid of regulations for these companies? Masterful idea. Give me a break with this. And our government has had numerous issues in dealing with this pandemic, and I don't blame people for not trusting them either. Okay? Number one, Trump is a liar. Okay? There's no two ways about it. If you don't believe that, I have nothing to tell you. I don't think we can have a conversation. Okay? And he is lying all the time. He's lied repeatedly about having the virus under control. He's lied about the preparedness for actually dealing with the virus. He blames everyone else, including Obama, for not having a vaccine for the virus, which is insane. Okay? He's peddled this nonsense about hydroxychloroquine and said that it's going to be actually the cure, which it is most certainly not. The medical studies that have come out have said that hydroxychloroquine is not effective in treating coronavirus. But he's also an idiot. Look at the people that he's actually put in place. The guy heading the CDC has been grossly incompetent and hasn't stood up to Trump. I don't believe the information coming from the CDC. I used to trust the CDC quite a bit, actually. I don't trust what the CDC is telling me right now because I think that Trump is bullying them. But the guy, Robert Redfield, who's running the CDC, he needs to resign. Because if he can't stand up to Trump, actually, and say, no, what he's saying right now is going to cause a public health problem, then he has no business being there. And of course, the rest of Congress isn't looking into it. Then you have the FDA. Well, the FDA was actually slow in approving tests. And why the hell did we need new tests anyway? How is it that South Korea developed at least 4 different coronavirus tests before we even had one? The WHO had a coronavirus test before we had one. There were doctors throughout the United States who were actually working on developing their own tests, and the FDA told them stop. That's why we don't have enough testing right now. And then Trump with Jared Kushner, okay, who I wouldn't allow to run a Dunkin' Donuts, okay, is now in charge of our coronavirus response. This is a failure of our government. But there are deeper problems here that go beyond even Trump or Google or Facebook. We don't have a unified healthcare system. We spend 20% of our healthcare dollars to deal with administrative costs. It's higher than any other country in the world as a percentage of costs. Taiwan spends 1% on administrative costs. What has that 20% gotten us? You would think with that 20% that it would be easy actually to share information among various medical providers so that you could have good contact tracing. That's not happening. And if you can't trust Google, Facebook, your government, the CDC, FDA, and your healthcare system, what do you have left? How are you going to have coronavirus testing? How are you going to have contact tracing? How are you going to prevent the deaths of tens of thousands of more people? And the longer this goes on, the more crazy the conspiracy theories are going to get. And you believe them at your own peril. Because now this isn't funny. For the longest time, I thought conspiracy theories, well, God, these people are just saying a bunch of idiotic things. This guy's sitting here with this crack foil or tinfoil hat coming up with crackpot theories. Now it's not so funny because as they're spreading a bunch of lies, people are actually believing it. That's why you got people walking around with no mask, not socially distancing, or believing that they're going to take hydroxychloroquine and they'll be perfectly fine. Now it's not so funny. This is where trust really matters. And because we don't trust these institutions, now it's costing people their lives. And it's going to be a lot of lives right now. But this is probably not the last pandemic that we're going to deal with. That is it for today.